My name is Charles Varner. This is a Dodge WC57. It's a 3/4 ton command car is what it's called. It's made by Dodge. These were relatively low numbers of these were manufactured. This one superseded the half-ton Dodge, which was slightly higher, had a slightly more tilted front end and a rounded grille and smaller wheels. The Army wanted a heavier duty 3/4 ton model, so this was produced. These were made, as I said, by Dodge. They were mainly used for the military top brass. This was an officer's vehicle, hence the name command car. It has a Dodge Flatheads inline 6-cylinder engine. It has a winch, as you can see here, a Braden 5,000-pound winch, which works off a PTO. The top speed on these is a whopping 30 miles an hour. You could maybe push it to 35. Generally, I drive at about 25 miles an hour most of the time. The situation with these vehicles, after North Africa, an officer wouldn't be caught dead in one because the Germans quickly figured out that this was the Army's command vehicle and they would single these vehicles out to destroy them. So after North Africa, these were used mainly by radio and reconnaissance platoons, much to their chagrin, I'm sure. I did not restore this one. It was already pretty well as you see it. The original story on this one was it was at the Yakima Anti-Aircraft Command on the west coast of the United States, and this was a training center. It's unusual that one of the newer 3/4 ton models would have stayed stateside. Virtually all of them were sent overseas, and the half-ton models stayed home. But I think one of the generals at the base had a certain amount of pull, and he wanted the new model. I've heard stories that President Roosevelt visited the base and actually toured in this very car. This car was found on the Columbia River with a tree growing through it about 30 years ago and was restored. The intention was it was to go to a museum here somewhere in Texas. That never happened. It wound up in private hands, and then I bought it and have had it ever since the early 90s. I did put a new old stock engine in it. The original engine in it was not correct as it was restored. And it's been running fine ever since. These were a 12-volt system, which was very unusual. Virtually all of the World War II vehicles, except the radio vehicles, were 6-volt. But this one was 12-volt because of the radio. And as you can see, this one's set up with the mast, the radio mast, and the radio installed in the back. They had various configurations for radios for these, and since it was a command vehicle, the radio was very important. It comes with all the usual accoutrements of a military vehicle. It's got spare gas water cans with the bucket for filling radiators or fuel tanks. It's got the brush guards, the blackout lights, Pioneer toolkit. It's got rifle racks, all of that. But probably one of the more interesting aspects is, and I wanted to mention that it also has a canvas top and canvas doors for inclement weather. But most of the time they left them with the top down for better observation. I want to show you the interesting tailgate assembly on this one and what it's designed for, because it being again a command vehicle, they use this often as a desk for maps, and this particular Army field desk that you see here was designed specifically for this vehicle to fit in the trunk area. And he would have, again, anything to do with leadership and command, everything from maps to plans, whatever they might need, as well as any extra equipment that might need to go back here. I primarily use this vehicle for parades, especially honoring the veterans, especially of World War II. We use it for reenactment battles where we portray World War II soldiers in combat situations. And of course, just for pleasure driving when I can. Normally this would carry a driver for the officers in the front. It could carry an additional passenger here, and usually 1 to 2 officers would sit in the rear. And if you'll notice, it's got a lot of leg room. This was designed for their comfort. The seats were leather or leatherette or canvas, any of those 3 varieties. Again, somewhat upscale for the officers. And if you look closely, this is a map table. Which is designed for the officers to sit into the back, place their maps on, and put the map table in their laps. And the other box over there is actually a box designed for holding the map. So you can see it's a pretty complete command vehicle. This often as additional equipment, you'll notice the rifle rack, and this is an M1 Garand or carbine or even a Thompson machine gun would fit here. This was often mounted here or sometimes next to the driver. And then typical of most military vehicles, rather than carry something, they would strap things on the fender. And what you see here is a German potato masher souvenir. This is an officer's bedroll, model 1935, which again, this being an officer's car, you might well have seen there. And of course, every GI's preoccupation when they weren't fighting was to play America's favorite sport, baseball. So hence you see the baseball glove and bat. So I try to provide things, equipment, accessories that would have been completely correct for the period of World War II.